Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 68. I am your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we are excited to have with us the internationally recognized and award-winning illustrator, Anoosha Syed. So, Anoosha, thank you for joining us. And I'm excited. As before we went on the air, I was telling you that I've been, an avid fan of your YouTube channel, following your Instagram account and just seeing the scores and scores of children's books that you've illustrated over the years. And thank you for taking the time out to join us tonight.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited to be on. I've been enjoying our little chat pre-show, and I can't wait to get into all of these questions in the next hour or so.
So before we jump into going into the heart of the interview, do you want to kind of give people a bit of a background of how you got into children's book illustration, and then we'll roll out with some of the questions.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So, as we just talked about, my name is Anoosha Syed. I am a freelance illustrator and a character designer for animation. I am Pakistani Canadian, based out of Toronto, and let's see. So I've been working full-time as a freelancer for the past 5 years now. I did my bachelor's in illustration and fine arts at a teeny tiny school in Switzerland called Ceruleum École d'Art Visuel. And I graduated from there 2015. Since then, I have been illustrating picture books, book covers, editorial illustrations, and whatnot. I have illustrated over 20 picture books, some including Bilal Kuxal is one which a lot of people know of. I'm Perfectly Designed, which was written by Queer Eye's Karamo Brown. I have also, as a character designer, I do a lot of freelance work with studios, including Disney and Netflix, and have worked with clients like Google as well. And so like the way that I kind of got into children's books was that originally I wanted to go to school for animation. Kind of like while I was in school, I realized that it wasn't really right for me. I don't have the patience for it. And so I ended up in the illustration route instead. But I'm glad that I still am able to work kind of in the animation industry as a development artist, basically helping to figure out what the style of a show could look like. And yeah, I think that's all I can think of.
And as you said earlier, you originally started off as you worked in animation, and you said in a previous interview when you're talking about your background that you're applying to try to get back into animation, and then you're doing freelance illustration on the side, and then you kind of realized, I really like doing this, so I'm going to do this full time. And so when you made that decision, and how much of a deliberate change did you make where it kind of evolved into doing that full time, and where you realized that you could easily make a living on just doing that?
Sure. So yeah, I guess like to further elaborate on that, I had always wanted to work in animation. And then when I was in school, I realized that I didn't want to animate specifically, but I still wanted to work with like the big studios. I always wanted to work, move down to LA and work with like Disney and Pixar. And so that was always my really big goal. And then I had applied constantly. I don't know how many times I got rejected. And then I was kind of just doing picture books on the side as like I think I'm good at this. I'm making money off of this. I'll just do this on the side, but I wouldn't fully commit to it because I still really want to keep applying to all of these animation studios because I thought that was my dream. And so I did this for about like 3 years. And then eventually I had like this moment, it was like the summer of 2018, where I kind of realized that, wait, this is still my dream. Like, why am I still doing this? Is this like just part of like this childhood fixation that I have on animation? Because I kind of realized that I don't like working 9 to 5, which is what I'd have to do at a full-time job. I like working in my own style, which if I was working at an animation studio, you mostly would have to work in other people's style. I like being my own boss, which again, I wouldn't be able to do at a 9 to 5 job. I like the flexibility of working from home. I like the flexibility of choosing the work that I want to do. So it didn't really, and like also the style that I work in is not really suited for animation. And so after doing all of these pros and cons, I kind of realized that animation isn't really for me. And I actually really like illustrating. And so I decided that summer, like, you know what, forget it. I'm not friends with the animation industry anymore. I'm just going to commit full time to illustration. And that ended up working out really well for me because I wasn't having like that one foot in the door of animation of just hoping like, okay, maybe I'm just going to keep my options open. Because I kept having that mentality of like, okay, I'm not going to take on this picture book because what if I get that offer from a studio?
Right.
I don't want to have to like, I'll be so overworked, I can't do both. So I'm not going to take these extra gigs. And so because I didn't have that foot in the door just waiting for them, I was able to fully commit to illustration, take on all the jobs that I was able to, really work on myself. And then that's when I felt that my illustration career could actually bloom, which it has since then.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned before too, is that you came to a realization that you didn't want to take on too much work because you said, and please anybody check out her YouTube channel. It's fantastic where
Thank you.
you give lots of great advice. And one of them is, I loved how you said this, is make sure you don't burn yourself out, like making sure that you do enough. You do enough to make this as a living, but don't give yourself too much work where you're all of a sudden you lose your passion. And what would be some of your advice for folks on how to balance, to do enough being a full-time freelance artist, to do enough to make a living off of it, but also balance it enough to make sure that you still sleep and have a life after that too?
So up until recently, I always, like you mentioned, I always had like a big problem of saying no to clients because I felt like, one, that I wanted to work on everything. It all sounded really great. And also I was worried that like, okay, if I say no to them, then like I'm not going to have this shot again. And so I felt the need to like take on everything. And obviously that ended up meaning that I would be overworked, stressed out, horrible time management, just like working into the night and weekends. And so it's tough, but you kind of have to realize that your health comes first because this is the only body you're going to get. If you're going to be working endlessly, you're going to end up with carpal tunnel syndrome. You're going to ruin your eyes and whatnot. So yeah, like try to take on the stuff that you're really passionate about. And then if you have to reject things that you still really want to work on, just let them know like, hey, I don't have the availability right now. Just keep me in mind for future projects. And usually they will come back to you. Or if you have like a lull in your work schedule, you can email them and be like, hey, I have some availability now. What's up? So that's if you are getting a lot of work. And if you are feeling that like you want to take on a lot of work to like make up so that you have like you're earning enough, then the other thing that I would also suggest is like it might also be that you're not charging enough for your work. If you're at that point where you're getting so much work that you have the ability to reject things, that probably means that like it's like supply and demand, right? You're having a lot of demand, and so you need to increase your rates to reflect that. And so if you're increasing your rates, that ends up meaning that you can, reject projects and you are pricing yourself fairly.
Right. And yeah, as an example too, is one of your videos that, definitely people check it out. You talk about rate setting, and I love what you did on there is like, and it's people are like, well, how much, and like, people say, well, how much should I charge? And your answer, and the video says, pick your annual salary, what you think you want to make. And then you got to figure out your cost of living where you live, because if
it's different for everyone.
It's different for everyone. And then he also, it gives people that sense of value as well to say, this is what that rating is. And as you're saying in that video too, is like, this is the minimum, this is your bottom you should be charging. You can always charge more, but this is the bottom. If you want to live off of, X amount of dollars, a salary a year, this is what you should be aiming for. And so with that said, is like, do you have, how do you have that ability to where, when you look at projects that you find, either through you or through your agent, do you ever have that ability to say, I'm not super excited about this, but I have an opening, or do you try to make sure you find projects that really excite you and really make you excited to want to to illustrate those?
At this point in my career, since I have been doing this for like 5-6 years now, I have I'm thankful that I have that power to be able to say no to a lot of projects, because like I have worked up to the point where there is like a certain salary, there's a certain fee that I am looking for, and there are a lot of projects which unfortunately that is out of their budget, and so there are moments where I can be like, okay, this is a project that is really exciting. Like I want to do it for the passion of. It's fine that I have to lower my rate a little bit for it.
Right.
But for the most part, I know what I'm worth. And so to those projects, I say, sorry, but no, thank you.
And so because of that, because of the name recognition now and the brand recognition that you have, how often do you feel comfortable going into like the publisher or the author to say, hey, have you thought about, I would prefer if I could, illustrate it like this? Or how much do you feel now that you can influence the end product per se?
I think that I do have quite a bit of power in that, mostly because like it is something that my agents fights for in my contracts, where there is like a note that says that I do have input into what the cover art can look like and into what the pages can look like. Final say is obviously always going to be for the publisher, but I do have some power that is written into the contract so that I can be like, hey, you know what? I don't like where this is going. This is what I would like. Please. So I do have a little bit of power in that, which is great. But hopefully as I keep working, maybe I'll get a little bit more power. We'll see.
So now that we're knock on wood, we're getting towards the end of COVID now. Have you seen, how have you been able to, organize your day for your work, because I remember you said in a previous interview that you're working from home, and then there's like too many distractions, and you tried to go to a work in a place, but this was back in or before. Have you been able to now? What would be your advice for artists and freelance artists on things that you've seen that worked really well for you, on how to manage your day and how to manage your space?
Right. So I have always hated working from home. I feel like I can never get any work done. There are just too many distractions at play, not just even like things like TV and video games, but even just like you have to get some groceries done, and like normally if you had a 9-to-5 job, you get it done like afterwards, like your work comes first and then that. But like if you're working from home, it's like, oh, I guess it's 10 o'clock. I guess I can go out for a little bit. And that what you think is a 5-minute run ends up being an hour, which cuts into your working time and whatnot. And then I always felt like I didn't have those boundaries of working at a certain time. I'd find myself working from like 9 to like 2 o'clock in the morning, but in like 30-minute intervals with lots of breaks in between. So it was a horrible system. And I kind of realized 4 years into it that like, what, I should just go to a co-working studio, which was great. I did that for 9 months and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
I finally found a system that worked for me. And so now that I'm back to working at home, it's a little bit better because everyone is working from home now. So I feel a little less isolated, I guess, because because the other problem was I working from home, all of my other friends would be working 9 to 5, and I'd be like, hey, you want to hang out? You want to talk? And they're like, no, we have a job. Like, can you stop bothering me? But now everyone has that flexibility, and so I can bother them as much as I want. But a couple of things that I figured out is that, one, for me personally, always change into your work clothes, even if it's just another pair of clean pajamas or sweatpants. Just having that mentality of like, okay, I'm going to work, I'm getting dressed up, makes you feel more in the zone. Same as also if you're able to, don't work in your bedroom, or like have like a dedicated area which feels like, yeah, I'm going to work. This is a separate place from my, like, you want to separate your leisure space from your workspace. That was always really important for me. And then, yeah, having like that fixed time of like, I'm going to work from 9 to 5. And after that, no emails, no work. You want to you want something out of me, I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Right.
And just having those boundaries, I think, was really important.
Right. And so when you set that up, how many, talk us through like a normal work day. How many projects are you working on consecutively?
So I usually have 3 or 4 projects going on at any given time.
Okay.
And that can be a combination of picture books and animation freelance work, and then maybe like a weird, like an editorial illustration or something random mixed in. But these are not happening simultaneously. It's usually that like I'll have maybe 2 that are happening that I have to work on right now, and everything else is in that stage of either contract negotiation or waiting for feedback or something else where like I'm really only working on 2 things at a given time.
Right.
Sometimes though, they all magically align, so I'm working on all of them at once, which is very rare, but when that happens, it sucks.
So how does that, are you the kind of person who like write their to-do list the night before, or do you kind of like wake up in the morning and say, I want to start working on this? Is it more of like, do you feel like some of these things become more chore, or like you're just saying, I really am excited about this project, I want to work on this most of the day? How does that work for you?
I am not a very organized person naturally. My natural state is just chaos. Like if I don't have a system in place, I'm not like a neat person or organized person. But like I find that having structure really helps. I just have to force myself to do it. So now what I do is that if I have like a long form project, like I've been working on a picture book called Monster and Boy for the past few weeks. I had to do final art for that. And there are like 80 illustrations in total that was due within a month. And so past me would just work on them whenever. And then by the end of the month, I'd be like, oh no, I have 20 left, which I did not account for. I have to do it all in 2 days. So what I do now is that I kind of divide 80 illustrations by 28 days. And I figure out like, okay, I need to draw 3 a day if I want to keep up my schedule. And then I try to just make sure I get 3 done every day. So that's like one system that I have. The other thing is just whatever is the highest priority. So I've got like 3 projects going on right now, but I have one thing that's due tomorrow. So that's going to go high up in priority. And then the other things can just like, whatever, I'll get to them eventually. And it just like keeps shifting around, whatever is most important that day.
And you mentioned and before we talked about a bit about, as a freelancer, you're basically running a business. And it's true. I know you said this in a previous interview, is that when you go to art school, they don't teach you how to run a business. They teach you how to do art. And it's the same goes for, say, like, someone that's going to like, getting a degree in music or something. So it's like, how important was that to advocate to make sure that there are business classes that art schools kind of have to mandate in curriculums?
100%. I don't think there's any question about it. School, besides like the drawing classes, there should absolutely be the business of illustration, taxes, just organization, how to find work. That's the other thing, which I don't think schools really cover, of like, how to set up your portfolio, how to cold contact art directors, how to manage social media, because that's all like marketing yourself is just like so much more important now. And like there are a lot of avenues for doing that on social media, which is how like 90% of the work I've gotten through marketing myself on social media. But a lot of people don't have those skills. It's a learned skill. And it is like another job because it does take a lot of like work and manpower. And like I do have a large following on my social media, but it's mostly because I put that work into it, which I have done over the course of like 7 years, which should be a thing that is taught in schools, but sadly it's not. And it is a very important skill for an artist.
Right. I mean, it's like, when it comes to art, it's like, it's impossible to get worse at something you do every day. But with finance, it is possible to get worse at it if you do it every day, because it's a skill. It's like, it's something you have to actually, like you said, you have to learn how bookkeeping, you have to learn how to negotiate. You have to learn. It's nothing that comes naturally, as you said. It's, and so do you feel, so And so would your advice be, if you're doing freelance, you have to either go to a local community college or take classes online? How to learn how to run a business?
Yeah, so like, I mean, you could do it on your own. Like, you don't necessarily need to do these things. But like,
Right.
I thought like these were areas of skill that I was seriously lacking in, that I had no idea how to do. And so I actively, because my school never taught them, I actively tried to seek out places where I could learn it. So I tried to find workshops around the city that taught business, both specifically for artists and just like general for small business owners and things like that. There are courses online, and then obviously there's YouTube, which was why I started my YouTube channel, because I thought that there was a lack of kind of like this business management kind of stuff specifically for illustrators. And so I wanted to share what I learned over the past few years through what I had to learn through trial and error. I wanted to give it on a platter, so you guys wouldn't have to do what I did.
No, as I said, you got some great tips and stuff in there. So and also too, you have a lot of your own, projects that you're working on. And it's like, so check out her earrings. So anybody hasn't seen, maybe I'll link it. I'll say, check out your earrings up here. Here's a link to her. But no, so you have a lot of, so I guess my question to you, as somebody that that's that is your full-time job, your own personal projects and your own personal work, do you use that as kind of like a warm-up before you jump in for the day, or do you use that as a wind down at the end of the day when you've done work?
I'm in a tricky situation these days where really for like the past year or so, maybe 2 years, I've barely been creating any personal work. I have kind of developed like a love-hate relationship to art, which is why a lot of people tell you like, keep your hobbies your hobbies. Like, if you make your hobbies your career, you're going to end up hating it, which I have learned very strongly. So like, I work all day just like drawing and drawing and drawing. Like before, when I was younger, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to draw all day for work. And then like after I'm done drawing for work, I'm going to draw for fun. I don't know how I had that stamina, because now like after drawing all day, I don't want to touch a pencil. I'm done. I'm off the clock. I'm just going to watch some TV.
Right.
So because of these past few years, I stopped doing personal work. I was just like, I'm going to work on client stuff, and then I'm going to just chillax. But that also meant that like I kind of lost that passion for art, and I kind of lost, I wasn't really growing either, because I feel like personal art is really where you end up experimenting and growing and kind of figuring out what you like. So towards the end of last year was when I was like, okay, you know what? I have to get back into personal work. So I bought a sketchbook. And so once in a while, I'll try to do a warm-up, just something quick, and with the intention of not really showing anyone, because that was also my concern of like, if I have to draw something, I'm going to post it immediately. And then I can't really, I would end up catering my work for viewers, if that makes sense. Not really for myself, but for what would get me views, what would get me likes, which kind of stales it down a little bit. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. I don't create as much personal work as I would like, but when I do, it's either mostly like a warm-up, I would say, if I have the time.
And is that where you kind of start seeing yourself doing more other types of creative pieces, like
yes,
earrings,
exactly,
and your knitting and your video editing and stuff?
That's exactly right, because like again, like I'm so done. The other thing, like I'm very much a digital artist, but as much like I want to say that like digital art is as valid of an art as just drawing with pencils and paint, but at the same time, you don't have a finished product that you can hold. And there is something about drawing traditionally, which does feel different. And that is something I miss. And so that's why I want to draw more traditionally for my personal work. And then also to get out of the world of 2D and into 3D. And so since COVID started, I wanted to learn different crafts. So I picked up that's why I started making like clay earrings. I wanted to experiment with that. I wanted to learn knitting. I tried tie-dye for a hot second. That didn't really go anywhere. But yeah, just like these other creative avenues, in the hopes that like, oh, maybe I'll find something else that I might be really good at, or something that I might even enjoy.
Right. Have you done screen printing yet? Because I remember you said you
I
wanted to
haven't. I
learn.
really want to, but like I, it's a lot of equipment to have just in your house. So eventually, once COVID is over, and like I can go for, I would really love to do more workshops, but I can't do that right now.
Right.
So eventually.
Yeah, I remember you saying, and you said, I always wanted to try that.
Mhm.
So, so my other question is, because you've done so much work, have you a lot of your stories? Have you, anybody that follows your work? Have you ever tried to, like? Is there any thing specifically for your fans? Any Easter eggs that you try to hide in any illustrations at all?
Hmm. Let me think. I wouldn't call these Easter eggs, but like when I'm working on my picture books, usually at the start of any picture book, there is a character design phase where I basically am taking the main characters and I'm doing like a bunch of different versions of them for the author and the art director to try to figure out, what is this kid gonna look like?
Right.
And so a lot of the time, so like maybe I'll do 5 or 6 of them and one gets chosen.
Right.
The other designs, I still like them. And so they often end up I end up reusing them either as background characters later on in my other books, or even as main characters. And so you might end up finding, like in one of my books, a reject from a previous book, and you have no idea.
Yeah, like, 'cause for example, it's almost thinking about like actors in different films. They're playing
Mhm,
different characters, but it's like the same. Like, for instance, like Rise Up and Write just came out a couple
mhm.
years ago. Like, any of those characters would be in the background, or in like in Bilal Cook's Doll or anything like that. Or
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that like there's like a background character in Rise Up and Write It who was a rejected design from I'm Perfectly Designed.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, and you mentioned too, like before, that you work mostly. Is that you work mostly in Procreate now, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
100% on Procreate these days.
And do you have you ever, when you're trying to design, working on some designs, do you kind of give yourself the freedom to, even though it's a job, and then especially when you're doing those initial designs to send off to the publisher or the artist, to say, uh, I tried out a different style, or do you try to like try something new with, like, maybe a different, uh, you know, a different brush setting, or a
Mhm.
different, color palette or anything like that?
Yeah. So I have a very commercial looking style for my picture books, but it's not intentional, because every time I have the character design phase, I'm like, hey, what if we try something weird? Okay. What if we go for this really stylized look? I'll do it every single time in all of my books. I'll suggest it.
Right.
And they never like it. They're just like, no, 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 let's keep it cute. Let's keep it like commercial. And
Right.
so I'm hoping like one of these days they'll bite, but we'll see.
Right. And you feel comfortable in the children's book niche? Have you tried doing, looking at other things like graphic novels or anything larger than that?
I have looked into graphic novels, and it is something that I do want to branch out into one day. I have started little bits and pieces where I did a teeny tiny comic for like an anthology for Adventure Time a couple of years ago. That was like
Okay,
my
yeah.
first foray into it.
Yeah.
I did most recently, and this is coming out, I think, next month. There is a book series called Last Kids on Earth. It's really
Okay.
popular, like chapter book series. And so they have which is also a Netflix series. And so their latest book, which is coming out, is an anthology of, I believe, 6 different artists that they've hired who, yeah,
Okay.
exactly, where they do like a short little comic. And so I was approached for it, and I was like, okay, this is great. It is like a 12-page graphic novel, basically. It's like a teeny tiny graphic novel. And so I was hoping that this could be like my training wheels for me to figure out, okay, how do graphic novels work? What kind of like structure should I have? Because it is a lot of work, because you're with picture books, you have a 32-page book, which you would think is a lot of work, but when you're working on a graphic novel, each page has like a bunch of mini illustrations in it. And so, well, a lot of graphic novelists, what a lot of cartoonists tell me, is that you can't be as detailed and as precious with graphic novels as you can with picture books. I would love every frame of a graphic novel to be a beautiful work of art, but that's not sustainable. You can't do that. And so you have to allow yourself to be more, a little simpler, a little messier if you want to be able to get that work done. And so that was something I had to learn. And so that's why like I took that project on. There's another project that I am working on, which is also like a mini training wheels graphic novel project. And I'm just doing like these little things so that hopefully one day I can work on a full book.
Right. And how, what's your impression? What's your feeling towards difference between signing a contract for a book series as compared to a one-off children's books?
Contract wise, it's so like the book series that I've worked on I've worked on 3 different book series. One is Monster and Boy, which was a chapter book. One was Hank the Pet Sitter, which was like a picture book series, and Daring Dreamers Club, which was also a chapter book. So when you're working with chapter books, you're less favored as opposed to the author, because it's a chapter book, more words, author is going to be getting more. More payment, more royalties, and all of that. And so that's going to be reflected in the contracts. Sometimes you won't have a royalty either, which sucks. Other thing with contract is that if you're working on a series, it is a longer schedule. And so you are going to be stuck on that for a while, which is why like I kind of have a rule that I don't really do series. I worked on Hank the Pet Sitter, which was an 8-book series. Never again. It took up all of my time. And I felt like after the 3rd book, I felt like I had outgrown it in terms of both like the kind of subject matter and the publisher and the salary. And I was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I can do better, but I can't. I still got like 5 books left. So yeah, that's one thing. And then you also have to keep in mind payment schedule, because you are working on a series. If you're able to negotiate for a payment structure where you're not just like getting paid at the end of every book, but you're kind of have it spread out, that like maybe you get a percentage on the beginning of the book when you're first signing the contracts, plus maybe a section on after you've submitted sketches, and then one at the end of every book, then you have like some payment that's like always coming in evenly rather than like a huge lump at the very end, which like, what am I going to do for the few months before then? Right.
Right. So, and before, so that gives that as, and I think you said it, I think in one of your YouTube videos, is that you've always kind of been kind of standoffish of signing a contract for a book series based off of what you said. It's like, what if there's, there's, the working with it, the interplay between, between personalities and stuff like that. So getting back to what where you work with Procreate. So Procreate hasn't been around for very long. Did you start, because didn't you, I think you said before you were using a Cintiq at one point, or?
Yeah, so I mostly used Photoshop for most of my career. When I was first starting out in digital art, like still in high school or whatever, I used something called paint.net, which was free, which was why I used it. But eventually I got a bootleg version of Photoshop. Don't tell anyone. And I used that for a while with my, first it was like one of those Wacom bamboo tablets, and then eventually a Cintiq, which was great. Loved it. I would lug it to school every day, which I don't know how I did that. It was heavy. And then eventually I was doing a lot of traveling, and so I needed something that was a bit more portable. And so I was like, oh, Procreate looks kind of cool. Let's try this out. But I would mostly use Procreate as like for sketching, because it felt more natural, like using a sketchbook, and then do my final artwork on Photoshop and my Cintiq.
Right.
Eventually, as Procreate's capabilities got better and better, they were able to support CMYK. They were able to support like larger and larger file sizes and dimensions. Eventually, I was like, wait, Procreate's great. I'm just going to work on that entirely. And so for the past 2 years, I've been doing all of my work on Procreate, like entire picture books, everything. It's really great.
Does that, as you mentioned earlier too, do you feel a bit of a challenge working on something that's so portable, as you're saying earlier, that you want to make sure you have a workspace, and that do you ever get tempted to take your iPad or whatever? It's like, I'm just going to go sit in the living room and work on this. How are you able to in your mind to make sure that you're still separating it with some when you utilize a medium that's so easily portable?
I don't know if that's a disadvantage. I'd say that's an advantage
Yeah.
more than anything.
Okay.
For me, I don't really have a problem with like wanting to work in bed or on the sofa. Like I got back issues. I need that support. I need like a good desk and setup and everything. But I like that, like, if I'm working all day at a desk, I still have the option where, like, if I want to mix things up, I can work out in the backyard if it's a beautiful day. If I am working and then I see that my sisters, my husband, they're watching TV, I can be like, oh, I can take a little break. I can work and watch with them. So I do, like, I love the portability. I can keep that boundary of working at my desk when I need to and then taking breaks as needed.
Okay. So you don't see that as you're as long as, like you said, you put on your work clothes, you can take that iPad wherever you want then, basically, too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And how does that work with, is there a specific, I guess my question is, how long did it take you to get the right brush set and get the right color set? And how long did you feel as though, working in Procreate, to say, this is it, this is my style? And do you have different palettes and different brush sets for different books, or are you pretty much sticking to that?
So that the other reason why it took me so long because I did like sketching on Procreate for the first few while, but I always stayed on Procreate for final art. And one of the reasons was that on Photoshop, you have Kyle Webster's Photoshop brushes, absolutely amazing. And then couldn't find anything that replicated that on Procreate, which is why I avoided it for so long. Eventually, I did find some brushes that I really liked, namely the 6B default pencil brush. Like I use it for literally everything. That is my absolute favorite brush now. And then I ended up finding, as like Procreate's capabilities got better and better, there were some brushes that were able to replicate that, because I have a very traditional kind of look that I try to recreate with my art. So I think like Max Olikny, I think that's his name. He creates a lot of great traditional looking brushes, which I love using. So I use those a lot. As for color palettes, for brushes, generally I use a 6B pencil brush for most of my books. For Monster and Boy specifically, I do use that for like the line art and everything to get that specific look. Like that's like the main brush I use. For other books, I'll use like a variety of different ones. But for Monster and Boy, 100%, it's just the 6B pencil. And for color palette, I usually just do my own thing, but I do have like a fixed palette that I'll use for certain illustrations, which are just like my default. I like these colors. I like this particular shade of yellow. I like this particular shade of green and blue and whatnot. And I have that palette saved so that if I don't want to really think about, because I try to be adventurous with my colors, but if I don't really want to think, then I'll just pick and choose from that palette.
Okay. And do you see that, like publishers and people that are reaching out to you to, when you do that initial, here's some designs, do they have the literacy enough to say, how is this? Is it, so I guess my question is like, how you're basically, talking to other artists, you kind of speak the same language, but when you're talking to people that are outside that, do they ever say, how come this looks different? Or do they know that you tried a different brush style on that? Or
yeah, I do get that sometimes where like, like when I'm doing like that initial character design stage or like that rough work, I'll send it over, especially like when I'm doing my interior sketches. They're really ugly. Like I'm sure there are some examples on my website, but like they're extremely rough because they don't need to be clean at this stage.
Right.
But some art directors will be like, this looks off. Like why are his arms like not the same size? Like why does he look like this? I'm like, okay, no, like I know it looks like this now, but it's not going to in the final, okay? Like don't worry about it.
I'm trying to pull it up on your website here. Yeah, you got some great stuff here.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, what have you seen as you when you look at some of your previous stuff? What are some of the things that you've been most proud of in your over the last few years that you wished you started doing, near the beginning? Like, oh, I wish I I was afraid to do that. You mentioned Procreate, jumping right into Procreate.
Yeah.
Anything specifically about your styles or anything that you would say that you would that you've been extremely proud of discovering as you've been working?
I think like if you scroll down a little bit, there is one piece that I'm the whale piece. I am still super proud of this piece. So with that one, I'm really happy with like the color choices that I took for it. It's not like a palette that I had ever done before. So that was something that I was really happy about. Other things that like I am really glad that I picked up on would be that I wish that I had started if you look at my like really early portfolio from like when I first started, all of my characters are pretty much just like standing straight, looking forward, and they're all very cookie cutter, cute, and they all look pretty similar to each other. And then eventually I kind of realized that, like that's not what people look like. I mean, it's cute and all, but
Right.
I think people value more when they look at characters when they see something that reminds them of real life, where they can look at a character and be like, oh, I totally know this kid. Like I went to high school with this kid, or that you see something in yourself in them. And that could be like little quirks in like maybe their teeth are kind of wonky, or maybe like their clothes don't fit just right. Like little details like that give your drawings a little bit more life and humanity, which I didn't really have at the very beginning when I first started drawing. I was very focused on like making them look very perfect when, we're not perfect. So that was one thing that I definitely have learned to add on into my work over the years.
Is there anything that you have on here that is more of like a slip of the pencil that really enhanced your style and you've been able to keep going with?
Let me just pull up my website real quick. Like what do you mean? Could you elaborate on that?
Well, for instance, like it's those happy discoveries you make, and that artists make in their style, where they're drawing either eyes in a different way or a head, and then all of a sudden, something slips in the wrong way, and it's like, well, actually, that's a happy accident. I think I'm gonna.
Yeah. Let me think. I guess, yeah, I think another thing that I started doing, if you look at my books, my published works section, I have like my book, which I did, I Am Perfectly Designed. One thing that I kind of started doing, particularly in this book, was having like these really graphic shapes and not really caring about, yeah, exactly, like this piece, the picnic piece, where I did not care about perspective. Because I've always been really bad at perspective, but I kind of ended up using it to my advantage to create like these, this interest in combining things that had depth versus things that looked flat. So if you look at something like the lemonade, normally in the past, I would have had the lemonade look like a real life thing of lemonade, where like the bottom would be curved, the label would be curved around the bottle as well, so that it would have like that sense of 3D. In this one, I kind of tried something different, or like more that I couldn't figure out the perspective because it's at a weird angle. And I was like, you know what, let's try something else. Let's have that bottom completely flat, as if you were looking at it straight on, even though you're actually having an overhead shot.
Yeah,
Technically,
that's awesome.
this lemonade doesn't make any sense. Like it shouldn't be straight on like that. But I feel like that, and then the same with the glasses as well. It adds this kind of stylization to it, which I thought was charming.
And do you see yourself as, mainly doing children's books, a sense of duty to make sure that the artwork is accessible to the audience?
Can you elaborate on that as well?
Sure. I get my question is like, it's like making sure that you're drawing it enough where it inspires, inspires children at the age group to say, hey, I want to draw like this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, especially with like children's books, maybe less so with like the chapter books and stuff, because you're getting to a larger, bigger age group. But with picture books, I always tell like in my YouTube videos that like kids aren't really reading. They're at that age where like maybe some of them are, but for the most part, they're really just like looking at the pictures, which is what I did. I loved reading as a kid, but it was mostly just looking at the pictures and making up my own stories for them. And so that's why I feel like illustration has such a big part in it, and you want to try to make sure that your art is as like friendly, but also tells as much story as possible in them. And so in the ways that I try to make it accessible for the kids is that I try to make sure that like if a kid is reading it, even without the text, you instantly know what is going on, and even a little bit more than the text. I talk about this in one of my videos where I explain my picture book process, where if you have a page which is just like, Billy is cooking pancakes for breakfast. That's just like that's the only thing that's written on the page. In the illustration, you can go so much deeper in that into telling a whole story. It's like, is he cooking pancakes in the middle of the night when he's not supposed to, and is like the entire kitchen a big mess? Or is he cooking pancakes for his mom for like Mother's Day or something, and you have mom sitting at the table with a blindfold on her or something? So there are all of these extra details you can add in for the kids, where, as I've also mentioned in my videos, authors have a 500-word limit usually for picture books, which is not a lot of words.
Right.
So they have to be really limited in how much they can write down. So it's up to the illustrator to fill in that story for them.
And like you said, and I think you mentioned it in one of your videos as well, is that the picture itself has to tell the story that without the words. So being able for as basically it's, in so many words, is like, as as a parent reading reading a children's book, you're narrating the picture in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah. No, that's a really good point that you brought up. And so, with that said, and do you, as you see, that gives you the ability to put in as much detail as you want and do you see, and how much near the beginning of your career did you get pushback, or how much did they say, take this out, that you see with when presenting it to the publisher and the author as well?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of pushback towards the beginning if I wanted to add something in or go outside of my style, especially because like some of the projects that I worked on at the very beginning, things like very first picture books I worked on, one was called Busy Noisy School, another one was called Little Witches Zoom and Broom, and then Hank the Pet Sitter. They were extremely strict in what I could draw, where they either wrote down exactly like, you in this spot, this is happening. And in the case of the picture books, Busy Noisy School, the art director straight up drew out in a rough sketch, hey, this is what you're supposed to draw. So it was great because it was my first project. So that was kind of like training wheels for me to figure out like, oh, okay, this is exactly what I have to draw. But eventually I was like, hey, I need a little bit more creative freedom. Whereas now, what the art director does is like, they'll give me the text, and sometimes it's extremely vague on like what's going on. And then they'll give me no description of what goes on the page. They're just like, here's your text, just do whatever you want. Wow. And so I appreciate that creative freedom more now. And I have that ability to be like more, try something new. And like, sometimes I'll give the art director several different options of like, okay, this is what I think this is what you want me to draw. But I did this other thing, which I think is weird, but cool. And I think it could work. And sometimes they end up liking it. Sometimes they don't, but that's okay. I gave it a shot.
Yeah. And some of the children's book authors that you've worked with have you just clicked so well with one that you're like, hey, when's your next book? I'm really excited. Like, have you had like some really good experiences with that the two of you just clicked really well, and that you were almost on the same page on how the books look at?
So I wish I could say that I have, but this is mostly because I don't think a lot of people know this, but illustrators don't have any contact with the author when they're working on a picture book. Wow. Yeah. So like the whole process is that, like the author submits their manuscript to the publisher, and then the publisher on their own would choose an illustrator who's right for the project. I get a lot of authors coming to me being like, hey, can you illustrate my book? I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. The publisher chooses their own artist. Right. So yeah, the publisher chooses an artist. They get to work on it, only talking to the art director and editor. And the reason, like, they try to keep the author and the illustrator separate because author doesn't really know about art, and illustrator doesn't really know about the writing part. And so they don't want to mingle those two parties together because it could cause, like a little bit of drama. So they just separate it to keep it professional. So what usually happens is after I finish working on a book, sometimes I'll get in touch with the author and then we'll be like, oh, it was great working with you. And then we might develop a friendship. Like the Bilal Kuxal writer, Aisha Syed, I'm pals with her now. It was great working with her and I'd love to work with her again in the future. But while working on the book, I had no idea who she was.
Okay.
But because I'm working with the art directors, there have been art directors who I've had an amazing connection with, and ones that I would definitely love to work again with the future. Like it just felt like everything was clicking and that we were on the same page about everything. And then they also, for me personally, I'm the kind of person who just needs like so much validation for my work. Or like if I submit something, I'm like, is it okay? Please tell me. And some art directors will be like, yeah, it's fine. It's okay. And then like some people will be like, yeah, that's great. I love it. It's awesome. I'm like, thank you, please. Thank you. I just need validation. And those are the ones that I really click with.
So just like most worlds, it's like the world's big, but at the same time, it's such a small community. It's like, how do you, obviously without giving names out or anything like that, if you ever like looked at a children's book and you're like, I wish that author would have called. Like, I wish I would have illustrated that book for him instead. I knew I would have. Like, is there any?
Gosh, there are a lot of books like that. But also, like, there are ones where, I mean, like, I have rejected books, but I have also been rejected myself. Where like there have been a couple of, especially the summer of 2019 was a sad year for me. Which was like, for some reason, there were 3 dream projects that I was contacted for, being like, hey, we love your work. Can you like submit a test? Because like we were looking at a couple of different artists and we'd love to have you in the running. And so there were 3 of these, and I was in contest for all of them. And I was really cocky. I was like, I'm totally going to get all of them. I don't know how, like, I'm going to be struggling to manage all this work, but it's okay. I got this in the bag, and I got none of them. Absolutely none of them. And so, yeah, that was really rough. I forgot what the question was. Do you remember what the question was?
But then basically, but you knew what these projects were. Then you saw the finished books. Like,
yes, okay. And then I saw the finished books, and I saw who ended up working on them, and sometimes they end up being my friends, or like colleagues, but I don't want to mention it. And then there are projects where like I rejected them because I was like, oh, I'm too good for this. I don't want to take this on. And then I see other people take it on, and I want to be like, you got my sloppy seconds, but I can't do that either.
And how often do you with the in the children's book illustrator world where you recommend, when somebody says this, do you ever like say, well, this might not be for me, but I recommend this person's really good? So how often does that happen?
Yeah, there are a couple of instances on that. I've tried to when I can, because sometimes like the publisher has other people in mind already. But if there are projects, especially because like I get approached a lot for projects specifically about South Asian topics, and so I'll be approached for them. I'm like, this is not for me, but I do have like a list of potential artists who could be a good fit. Give them a shout out, and then see if they could be good. And sometimes they have gotten the work, which is awesome. And then there might be like other books where I feel like, okay, I don't really have, it's a really great project, but I don't think this is the right style. But I don't think I have the capability for it. I think like this other guy might be perfect for it. So if I'm able to, I will try to recommend other people. But for certain clients, I'm just not able to, because I don't think they're interested in hearing. They might have like other people that they're asking for. But I think it's definitely important to what's the word? To extend, to just help other people out when you're able to, because when you help other artists, eventually that good karma comes back to you.
Right. True. Wow. Perfect. Well, we're just about out of time, Anoosha. Yeah. This has been great. So where can people find, if they're interested in checking out your stuff or seeing any of your books, where would be the best place they could see you?
Yeah, sure. So for social media, I am at Foxville_art on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know how to use TikTok, but I think it's important. So the teens are on there. Yeah. I'm AnooshaSyed.com. That's my professional website. As for my like current projects that I've got going on, I mean, like all of my books, some of them you can find at your local bookstore. Just, type it up on that weird bookstore computer that they have, or go onto Amazon, search for Anoosha Syed, you'll find all my stuff there. Most recently, my latest book that just came out is this, go back onto the Amazon page. The Monster and Boy, the second book. It's a 3-book series. The second book just came out. It's somewhere on that list. You'll find it. This orange one, yeah. This book just came out. It's awesome. I recommend you read the first book first. It's good for ages like 6 to 10, I would say. It's like a chapter book. It's really fun. Absolutely love it. And then if you go back, the Rise Up and Write It is another book that came out in January. I'm super happy with this one. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Basically a picture book. It's about activism and protesting. And the cool thing is that there are a bunch of these envelopes inside of the book. It's like these pages that are made to look like envelopes. And inside of them are actual inserts, like things like posters, stickers, flyers, postcards, all of these like interactive things. So I think this is a great present for any of the little kids in your life.
Wow. Yeah, I remember you said it. What did you call it? A novelty book? Or
yeah, it's a novelty book. That's right.
Okay, right. Okay.
My first time working on one of these. Yeah, so like you've got like this little envelope, and if you flip it over to the back, it has that little insert where you can just grab something out of it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's exciting.
This was really fun to work on.
Right. So this was like one of those projects where like you're raring to go when you woke up in the morning to work on it and everything.
Yeah. Like this. I was really happy with this. It was like a tight schedule, but like I made it work, and I really hope I get to work on other stuff like this because it was so much fun.
And also too, definitely check out your YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, just search Anoosha Syed. I'm on YouTube. I've got a bunch of videos just focusing on like how to manage having an illustration career, things like pricing, finding work, agents, and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Anoosha. This has been a pleasure. And I'll be excited to just keep following your work and best of luck.
So, thank you so much for having me on. This was so much fun.